What if the moment everyone expected BTS to simply follow choreography? Jimin suddenly stepped forward and took control? The music stopped. The rehearsal floor went quiet. And for a few seconds, all eyes appeared to be on Jimin. Not because he was standing in the center. Not because someone announced him as the leader. But because he seemed to realize something wasn't working, and instead of waiting, he stepped in. And that single moment could have changed the entire energy inside the rehearsal room. But here's the part that makes this so fascinating. What exactly happened before Jimin stepped forward? Why did he suddenly take such a commanding role? And what happened when the other BTS members responded? Today, we're breaking down the dramatic rehearsal scenario surrounding BTS and Jimin ahead of the FIFA World Cup 2026 final halftime show, and why this imagined behind-the-scenes moment perfectly captures something ARMY has always noticed about Jimin. Because sometimes, leadership isn't about who wears the title. It's about who moves first when everyone else is waiting. The rehearsal room was already charged with pressure. Imagine the scene. A massive stage. Powerful lighting rigs hanging overhead. Speakers capable of shaking the entire venue. Crew members moving quickly across the production floor. Choreographers checking timing. Dancers marking positions. Managers watching the clock. And somewhere in the middle of all that controlled chaos, BTS were preparing for one of the biggest performances imaginable. The FIFA World Cup Final. Millions of eyes waiting. Millions of viewers expecting something unforgettable. And when you're BTS, good enough simply isn't good enough. Every transition has to be sharp. Every formation has to land. Every camera angle has to work. Every second matters. One missed count can change an entire sequence. And that's exactly why rehearsals can become intense. The music starts. The members move. One formation hits. Then another. The choreography accelerates. The lights change. The beat drops. And then, stop. Something isn't right. Maybe the spacing is slightly off. Maybe the timing between two formations isn't completely synchronized. Maybe the transition feels too slow. Whatever the reason, the rehearsal pauses. And suddenly, there's silence. That silence is where our story begins. Because according to the imagined scenario behind this video, Jimin doesn't simply wait for someone else to fix the problem. He looks around. He watches the formation. He studies the members. And then he steps forward. Not dramatically. Not with a grand announcement. Just one small movement. But sometimes one step can change everything. Imagine Jimin saying something simple. Let's try that transition again. Nothing explosive. Nothing theatrical. But the energy changes. Because everyone knows that Jimin understands choreography on an unusually deep level. He doesn't just memorize movements. He feels rhythm. He understands angles. He knows how one performer's movement affects another performer standing several feet away. And perhaps most importantly, he understands how the choreography should look from the audience's perspective. That's where things get interesting. Because Jimin has spent years performing alongside some of the most recognizable performers in the world. He knows what happens when 7 people are moving together at full speed. One person turns half a second too early. The formation changes. One person takes a step too far. The entire picture shifts. One camera misses the intended angle. A visually perfect moment can disappear. So Jimin starts explaining. Not ordering. Not commanding. Explaining. He demonstrates the movement. One step. Turn. Pause. Then another step. He repeats it. And suddenly the rehearsal floor feels less like a giant production and more like a dance studio. Everyone watches. The pressure begins to disappear. But then comes the first unexpected twist. Jimin doesn't focus only on himself. He focuses on everyone. He looks toward one member. Then another. He checks the spacing. He adjusts his own position. And then he demonstrates the transition again. That detail matters. Because real leadership often looks surprisingly ordinary. It isn't always standing at the front. Sometimes it's noticing the person beside you is struggling before they even say anything. Sometimes it's slowing down so someone else can catch the rhythm. Sometimes it's saying, again. Not because the previous attempt was bad, but because you know the next one can be better. And that may have been the energy Jimin brought into this imagined rehearsal. But then, the music starts again. This time, faster. The first formation lands. The second transition begins. Jimin moves. The other members follow. 1 count. 2 counts. 3. 4. The choreography suddenly looks completely different. Cleaner. Sharper. More connected. And just when it seems like everything is finally working, the music cuts again. Everyone freezes. Why? This time, it isn't because something went wrong. It's because the choreographer wants to change something. And now Jimin faces a completely different challenge. Adaptation. The new adjustment changes the formation. Positions have to shift. Movements have to be relearned. And the clock is ticking. This is where the imagined story becomes even more intense. Because there is a massive difference between knowing choreography and being able to adapt when choreography suddenly changes. Jimin watches carefully. He absorbs the new information. Then he moves back into position. And instead of showing frustration, he starts marking the new counts. Quietly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again. 1, 2, 3, 4. The other members begin following. And slowly, the new formation starts taking shape. But there's another question. Why would Jimin step into this role at all? BTS already has an official leader. RM has carried that responsibility for years. He is the person who often speaks for the group, represents BTS publicly, and carries an enormous amount of responsibility. So this isn't about replacing RM. It isn't about changing BTS leadership structure. It's about something much more subtle. Different members naturally lead in different situations. RM might guide the group through an interview. J-Hope might dominate a dance rehearsal with his performance instincts. Jungkook might step up when physical execution becomes critical. Suga might offer a precise musical perspective. Jin might completely change the emotional atmosphere with one comment. And Jimin? Jimin can become the person who quietly connects the pieces. That's the kind of leadership people sometimes overlook. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need an announcement. The kind that appears when the situation demands it. And that is exactly why the imagined moment becomes so powerful. Because Jimin isn't trying to become the leader. He's simply helping the team move forward. But then something happens that nobody expected. One of the members laughs. The tension breaks. Everyone relaxes. For just a second, the massive World Cup production disappears. No stadium. No cameras. No millions of viewers. Just 7 artists rehearsing together. And that contrast is everything. Because only moments earlier, the room was filled with pressure. Now there's laughter. A smile. A small joke. And suddenly the atmosphere becomes lighter. That emotional shift tells us something important. The strongest teams aren't necessarily the teams that never feel pressure. They're the teams that know how to release it. BTS have performed on enormous stages. They've faced screaming crowds. They've dealt with technical problems. They've experienced mistakes. They've performed while exhausted. And yet, the chemistry between them is often built precisely in moments like these. Moments nobody in the audience gets to see. The rehearsal continues. The beat returns. This time, everyone is more confident. Jimin moves through the formation. His expression changes. The playful smile disappears. Now he's completely focused. Eyes forward. Breathing controlled. Every movement precise. The camera, in this imagined scene, would move closer. You would see the concentration in his face. The sweat beginning to form. The exhaustion. But also the determination. Because this isn't just another rehearsal. The FIFA World Cup Final is the kind of stage where a performer has almost no room for hesitation. The world is watching. And Jimin knows it. So does everyone else. The music builds. The choreography becomes more powerful. The formation expands. Then contracts. The members move across the stage as one. And suddenly, the final transition approaches. This was the transition that caused the earlier problem. The moment that forced Jimin to step forward. The moment that created the entire chain of events. Now it arrives again. 3, 2, 1. The formation changes. Jimin turns. The others move. And perfect. No hesitation. No collision. No visible confusion. Just 7 performers moving together. The rehearsal doesn't stop. The music continues. The beat becomes enormous. And for a moment, you can imagine what the actual stadium might feel like when that sequence happens in front of a massive crowd. The lights explode. The audience screams. Thousands of light sticks rise. Millions watch through screens. And the choreography suddenly becomes more than choreography. It becomes a statement. But remember what happened before they reached this moment. It started with a pause. A problem. A decision. And one person stepping forward. That's why the imagined Jimin moment feels so emotional. Not because he suddenly became BTS official leader. He didn't. But because he demonstrated a different kind of leadership. The kind that appears naturally. The kind that doesn't require permission. The kind that says, "We can fix this together." And maybe that's the part ARMY would connect with most. Because fans have watched Jimin grow for years. They've seen the shy performer. The perfectionist. The artist who sometimes puts enormous pressure on himself. They've watched him become more confident. More expressive. More comfortable taking up space. And moments like this represent that evolution. But the story still isn't over. Because after the rehearsal finishes, there's another emotional moment waiting. The music stops. Everyone catches their breath. The room goes quiet again. Jimin looks around. And perhaps, in this imagined scenario, he simply smiles. No celebration. No dramatic speech. Just a small smile that says, "We got it." That could be the entire victory. Not the final performance. Not the applause. Not the headlines. The rehearsal. The work nobody sees. That is where performances are actually created. Before the fireworks. Before the cameras. Before the screaming crowd. There are hours of repetition. There are mistakes. There are corrections. There are moments when the body is exhausted and the mind wants to stop. And yet the performers keep going. Again. And again. And again. That is what makes a world-class performance look effortless. The audience sees 3 minutes. The artists experience hours of preparation. And somewhere inside those hours, leadership appears in unexpected forms. Maybe that's why this imagined Jimin moment feels bigger than a simple choreography adjustment. Because it represents something BTS have demonstrated throughout their journey. They don't always need one person to carry everything. They can support one another. They can switch roles. They can become stronger because different members step forward at different moments. And perhaps that's what makes BTS chemistry so powerful. Leadership doesn't always move in one direction. Sometimes it moves through the entire group. One member speaks. Another demonstrates. Another encourages. Another makes everyone laugh. Another notices a mistake. Another fixes it. And together, they become something larger than 7 individual performers. They become one team. Now imagine the final rehearsal run. The lights dim. The stage becomes almost completely dark. A single beat begins. Boom. The first movement. Boom. The next. The crowd in the rehearsal venue isn't the real audience yet. But everyone knows what is coming. The FIFA World Cup Final. The biggest football stage on the planet. And BTS are preparing to walk into it. Jimin stands in formation. For one brief second, everything is still. Then the music explodes. And the entire group moves. This time there is no hesitation. No stopping. No confusion. The choreography flows exactly as intended. Jimin moves through the center. Then disappears into the formation. Another member takes focus. Then another. The camera angles change. The stage expands. The energy rises. And eventually, the final pose. Silence. 1 second. 2. Then the room erupts. Applause. Cheers. Smiles. Everyone knows they finally have it. Jimin looks toward the others. And perhaps there is a moment where they exchange a simple nod. No words needed. They know. The difficult part is done. And that's where the emotional meaning of this entire scenario becomes clear. Jimin didn't need to become BTS official leader to lead. He simply needed to recognize that his team needed something from him. And he responded. That's leadership. Not a title. Not a position. Not a microphone. A decision. A responsibility. A willingness to step forward when everyone else is trying to figure out what comes next. And maybe that is why fans connect so deeply with Jimin. Because beneath the superstar image, beneath the lights, beneath the choreography, there is still a human being who cares about getting things right. Not just for himself. For the people beside him. For the audience. For the performance. For BTS. And that may be the real story behind this imagined World Cup rehearsal moment. Not that Jimin replaced RM. Not that BTS suddenly changed their leadership structure. But that, for one critical moment, Jimin showed exactly what leadership can look like when it comes from instinct, experience, and care. The kind of leadership that happens without a title. Without an announcement. Without anyone asking. You simply see something that needs to be done. And you do it. And perhaps, when the actual performance day arrives, that preparation is what makes the difference.